Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy the Gaming Trouge here, and welcome to my very first ever console review. What are these? Well, I'm basically going to be taking a look at the console and what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and overall if it's a buy. If you want to go find it at your local game store like FTW here in the Mays County area, or if you want to go and find it on Amazon, eBay, etc, etc. So, let's begin with our very first ever console review, tackling the 64-bit console, the N64. Now, I love this system. I think this is one of the best systems that Nintendo's ever came out with, especially moving into the next millennium. Over here, we still have our main games. We have The Legend of Zelda, we have Mario Kart, we have Zelda, we have, I think I always said Zelda, but we also have a bunch of other Nintendo games like Cruise USA, which I guess is licensed by Nintendo, so forget about that. But we also have games like GoldenEye 007 and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. These are all basically my entire collection of games that I enjoy so far. And out of all of them, I think it's only these two that I don't really have the most experience with, just because I recently got these in later years. But after all that, these games were my childhood. I kid you not, even though I was born in 2002, these games I remember playing the most, especially whenever this system came out. My dad mainly played a lot of this, a lot of Smash Bros, a lot of Mario, a lot of Zelda, etc, etc. But let's go and see how, what the system does, because we use cartridges, and at a time when the CD industry was taking old. But the thing about the cartridges, Nintendo made a way smart move on this, in my opinion. They cut down on loading screens, so with PlayStation and Sega Dreamcast games basically having to load up a bunch of stuff, this system right here will actually go a lot faster and reduce loading screens. But of course it failed due to competition with the PlayStation and stuff like that, because I feel like more people will buy PlayStation because of Final Fantasy VII and etc, etc. But one of my main things that I love about this system is the fact that it had an expansion pack just to go and get more pixels and more data to the screen. This will of course be in conclusion of games like The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask and other games like that. I believe Turok 2 also needed you to have that type of support, but this right here is the main system. We got 4 controller ports. Nintendo knew how to confuse the heck out of people by having 3. You have 3. For the longest time, especially I knew where to grab it, just because I just figured it out. You use one hand right here, and then one hand right here. I'm sorry, I'm using one hand to hold the camera. So yeah, this is a bit though. Let me zoom you out just a little bit, but this is the Nintendo 64 controller, and this is how you're supposed to hold it for majority of the games. Games like Tetris will have you use this at majority of the times, but in actuality, I really like holding this. This will, like other pieces of Buzz Lightyear's control stick, I don't even know what you want to call it, it's pretty good. It also introduced this thing right here, the Rumble Pack. I know that the PlayStation DualShock controller actually has Rumble built into that, but in this time you just use 2 AA batteries. Take that off, and bam, you get Rumble and select games such as Star Fox 64. And yes, I actually do have Star Fox 64 and Zelda Majora's Mask. I decided to set them up because they want the closest 64 games for me to reach for this retrospective. But besides the point, this is a very good console controller, and one I would like to see used as a Nintendo Switch controller. Maybe having the record button and the home button and the pause and select buttons being on the controller without having to take away from what made this controller special to begin with. And yes, we have the C buttons. Yes, for majority of camera control, this is the way to go. And I know that in some games like Super Mario 64, it was kind of a pain in the butt to use, but you know what? In terms of using pretty good camera control, especially in the 90s, the late 90s, this was the way to go, and I personally really like it. And of course, the control stick is actually a 360 control stick that of course moves in 3 dimensionals, which actually outbeats the PlayStation and the Sega Dreamcast by a long shot. So with that, the N64 is actually a pretty powerful system running at 64-bit game systems. Games like GoldenEye 007, Cruise USA, Mario Kart 64, Super Mario 64, and the new Tetris, and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire run super good on these types of systems that I can't think of another system to actually Wait, yeah, some of you may argue that the PlayStation did a lot better job collecting more polygons and more data to the disc consoles, but here's the thing. PlayStation's using the discs, like I said before, they could really run video games without having to use a thing called loading. Yes, you heard me right, Sony actually had to load up their games. Granted, the games were still really good. Games like Final Fantasy VII, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and Tekken were pretty good for the time. And even though I did, of course, do a somewhat fake review on X-Men vs. Street Fighter, it is still an okay game overall. But anyway, that still didn't compare to the likes of this system. Even though this thing had more RPGs, Nintendo knew how to construct the casual people, and this system still did good with games like the Ocarina of Time, Mario Kart 64, and of course the other games that I've already listed. Why don't we look at these 7 beautiful games and see if this is still good enough for you to actually buy this console. Let's get this game out of the way. Star Fox 64 was a pretty good Star Fox game, and actually one of my favorites out of the Star Fox series. Even though the entire series basically rehashes the same story, Andros tries to take over the world, you stop him, type plot until like the GameCube era and the DS era. But this is still a pretty solid game, and I highly recommend it. The controls are still spot on as I remember them, but if you want to get a bit more of a better experience, I would recommend getting the Nintendo 3DS version of the game, because it's a lot faster, a lot more cleaner, it runs at a smooth 60 FPS. And I think it's still a pretty solid game. Multiplayer on the N64 though is the best, and I feel like it's amazing. Well, whenever you guys are thinking about some multiplayer games, these are probably the 4 on the N64 you're probably going to think of. I'm not going to be talking about T-Rock 2 because I actually don't have that much experience with T-Rock 2, but I think it's a pretty solid game that I guess it has aged just as well as GoldenEye 007, so I'll get to that in that basically FPS genre in a second. GoldenEye 007 for the N64 though is actually, in my opinion, pretty bad. Even for that type of standard. I mean, yeah, sure, the music's catchy, the gameplay kind of weird, but it really had no story to it. Not enough that Nintendo only had 2 games that actually had pretty good story, but actually didn't put as much story as I wanted to in this game. It was until the Nintendo Wii version where I actually started playing the GoldenEye games, and they were actually pretty good. I know it's developed by Whale, and I'm going to get my head chopped off because of how good Whale games are. And yes, this is a pretty fun game, but of course if you guys like playing dated shooters, well, I guess you're pretty much fine playing the remake in my opinion. But hey, if you guys still like the original GoldenEye, I still highly recommend you at least playing it if you're planning on picking up the N64. If you want into the shooty bang bang of a lot of shooters on the N64, with Kart Racers will probably be one of your next best, and this is of course one of them. Super Mario Kart for the, well, no, sorry, I got that messed up. Mario Kart 64 on the Nintendo 64 is actually a pretty solid game still in 2019. In actuality, the gameplay is still pretty good, the chorus music is super good, and of course the battle mode is just as chaotic as I remember it, and this is still a must buy whenever you guys are getting into the 64 games. But who's to say that a normal racing game cannot be fun? Cruising USA is still a pretty good game when it comes to the N64. Cruising USA is actually one of, I think it's outbeat a lot of other racing games to even begin with, considering that this is basically the best port you can get of the original arcade game in my opinion. So if you guys are planning on looking for a good racing game and not necessarily a Mario Kart, then yeah, give Cruising USA a shot. I highly recommend it. Tetris speaks for itself, but although this version in particular has the best soundtrack, so at least that's that for it. Leaves us with the one-player story games that I really remember playing in my childhood. Let's start off with this one, the most obscure one that I found. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. So I'm not going to let my nostalgia bias get me and tell you that this is a good game. I mean, it is still pretty dated, and I'll have a whole Trouge voices on this game probably later down the line. But in actuality, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire is actually a pretty fun game last time I played it. Now, we got the Nintendo Switch of Nintendo 64 games right here, a Zelda game and a Mario game. Basically what these characters basically brought into the third dimension. let's start with Super Mario 64 for the N64. Now, I'm actually going to be doing a Let's Play over this game so you guys can get more of my nostalgia feeling for this type of game. But Super Mario 64 is still a very good and very solid game. And yes, while I did get a DS port, I honestly highly recommend you guys tracking down the original 64 version of this game to actually play and indulge in all the goodness. And yes, Mario Odyssey does this game and then some. In actuality, I actually prefer Mario 64 over Mario Odyssey for a number of reasons. Mostly nostalgia, bias, and all that. But in actuality, I feel like you basically have fun with both games. And last but certainly not least, you can't have a 64 review without talking about one of the greatest games on the system, The Legend of Zelda. So I'm actually going to be talking about both Zelda games, Zelda Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I'm not going to be showing that much gameplay footage just because this game is super big. Both of them are way big. Actually, one of them needed that expansive pack I was telling you guys earlier in the video. But anyway, The Legend of Zelda, both games are actually really good for the system. It takes so much control over the system's power, the system's controller, and just puts them up to a max. And I still think that this is one of the most beautiful looking games on the N64 out of the entire collection we were talking about. Yes, it even beats out GoldenEye 007. I have a bias. So yeah, the Nintendo 64 in 2019. Is it a buy or is it a no buy? Well, I feel like if you want to go see how the 34th generation of video game consoles came out, well, obviously that's why people had the NES. But if you want to know how the good generation of consoles came out, then I highly recommend you guys picking up these N64 and with some of these games. I mean, some of these games are really good. Others, like the FPS ones, could be dated. The waste costing ones can only be done to death. Tetris is Tetris. Star Fox is Star Fox. But we still have a good selection of games and then some. I didn't even bring up Super Smash Bros. In this video, mostly because I never had it growing up. I know it's super weird. But with the next console review that I would like to do, we are taking a good look at this right here, the All-American GameCube. I honestly don't know why I had a American flag on this system, but okay. I'm the Gaming Trouge, so good night, and keep